You've spelunked into the Matt Cave. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. This week, it's the All-Star Weekend for the NHL and the NBA. Major League Baseball is starting spring training, which I know for a lot of you doesn't mean anything, but it means a lot to me. I love baseball. And we have the MLS kind of starting out a little bit. It's a little different. It's the CONCACAF Nations Cup, which is like the U.S. and Mexican leagues going at each other. It's weird. It's supposed to mirror the Champions League in Europe. It just doesn't do a good job of it because, well, there's like two leagues over here. So that's what's happening with RSL. So I'll kind of give a little preseason preview, basically just who to look out for on the team this season. Just like last year, not much is expected of Real Salt Lake. So I'll get into that here later on in the episode. And then this past week, I have been playing a lot, shocker, of World of Warcraft. But I've been playing World of Warcraft Classic Cataclysm, not retail. And so there's some things I've noticed, and I want to tell you all about it. So thank you all so much for being here. As always, please do like, comment, subscribe, 5 stars, thumbs up, wherever it is, however you're listening. Helps me out a ton, gets more spelunkers in here, and by now you guys could just recite to me what my goal is, but it is to do this every day. So I've been doing it once a week. I want to be able to do it every day. That's my goal. So I've finally got a big boy job that pays well enough to where I can actually get like upgrades and stuff for this show, you know, face cam, stuff like that, like actual video editing for my show. So there should be more stuff coming later this year for like YouTube Shorts, all of that stuff. It's just right now we're still in the old classic podcasting mode. So thank you again for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. You can find me on YouTube. That is the Matt Cave Podcast, all one word. You can also find me on Facebook. That is the Matt Cave Podcast. And you can also find me on Twitch. And I say this every week. I'm going to start soon. I really am. I just need to get more comfortable in my big boy job. That's what needs to happen. So it'll happen soon. I don't know what I'll be playing, but I will be there. And we can chat sports, video games, current events, whatever it is you want to talk to me about, you can find me there. That is twitch.tv/Matts, M-A-T-T-S, Cave. All right, so that's the housekeeping. All of that stuff is out of the way. Let's dive into the show, and let's start with the All-Star Weekend blues. So the NBA All-Star Weekend is a mess. It's a mess. It became a mess when Adam Silver let the players decide what to do with it. And there's two extremes when it comes to All-Star Weekends. There's the extreme of the NBA, where it's the players decide everything, right? And it's not fun to watch for anybody except for themselves, because nobody plays defense, nobody's really trying, nobody breaks a sweat. And I get it, you don't want to get injured in a game that means nothing, but it's a game that means a lot to the fans. It does. Seeing the best players in the league play against each other is something that should be exciting and fun. But the NBA Players Association has made it the opposite of that. And it's not worth watching. I mean, Mac McClung had an awesome dunk in the dunk contest where he jumped over a car the same way Blake Griffin did, but Mac McClung is like 6 inches shorter. So it was a really cool dunk, but nobody cares. Because Mac McClung is not Vince Carter. He's not Dominique Wilkins or Michael Jordan. Forgive me for saying this, because it's not true, but he's a nobody when it comes to drawing eyeballs. So that's where the NBA is at. They tried to do this battle of the sexist things between Sabrina Ionescu, Caitlin Clark, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry. And I applaud Sabrina Ionescu and Caitlin Clark for just saying no. Like, they're not a sideshow. Those two sell tickets just about as good as the NBA does. They don't need to do this little sideshow. So I applaud them for just saying no. That's amazing. It makes me want to watch the WNBA that much more because they have pride and they play hard. That can't really be said for every game of the season in the NBA. The LeBron James era of the NBA has kind of ruined a lot of stuff. It's given more power to the players, Forgive the GameStop pun there, but it's given more power to the players, but as we've seen over the years, it's not necessarily a good thing because it's just not worth watching anymore. So that's one extreme. The other extreme is what baseball did with Bud Selig, where he's like, all right, I want to make the All-Star game mean something, so the winner of this game gets home field advantage in the World Series. Well, guess what? That only matters to two teams. Guys who are on, let's say, the Angels or the Rockies, they know they're not going to make the World Series. They're not even going to make the playoffs. They're not even going to win 70 games. So why would they try hard in an All-Star game, potentially get injured in it, playing for another team, basically? So that's the other extreme. In the middle is the NHL. And the NHL has figured it out. It is the Four Nations face-off, initially created as a middle finger to Russia for what they're doing in Ukraine and elsewhere. But it's amazing. It's night and day between the NHL and every other league when it comes to All-Star. Even MLS isn't fun to watch because it was the MLS All-Stars versus a visiting European team that was in preseason warming up, so you didn't even really get to see the European stars of Real Madrid or Barcelona, Arsenal, Manchester United. You didn't get to see the actual stars because they didn't want to get hurt. And then the MLS players are so outclassed that it's embarrassing for them. So that's what the MLS does. And now it's MLS versus Liga MX, which is the Mexican soccer league, which is a little bit better. There's more pride at stake there, so the game has been a little bit better, but it's not the NHL. So last night, February the 15th, USA and Canada faced off for the first time in 10 years with NHL-level players. You could thank Gary Bettman for that, but that's a different conversation for a different day. This game was outstandingly fun to watch. And yes, I was rooting for the U.S. because, guess what? I'm an American. And that does still mean something to me, unlike... Anyway, I had so much fun watching that game. I knew that the players were, for the U.S. specifically, were so fired up hearing the national anthem get booed. They were fired up against Finland for it, and it ratcheted up again in this game against Canada. 3 fights in the first 9 seconds. The Kachuk brothers and JT Miller tossed gloves and threw fists to show, first, they're not afraid of Canada, and second, they're really not afraid of Canada. And that was going to be the tone, and there was going to be hitting, and it was going to be a real game. It was not an all-star showcase. It was so much fun. So much fun. From Connor McDavid screaming down the rink at 25 miles an hour, scoring a goal, to him then, in like a couple of minutes after that, getting just crunched to the ice by 2 Americans. And then goals from Jake Gensel, Shane Larkin. It was such a passionate game. It was a gold medal game. It was a Stanley Cup playoff game. That was the intensity that was in that game. And after the game, you saw the sheer disappointment on the Canadian side because it was the first time that Canada had lost with Sidney Crosby in the lineup in 27 games. 27 games. They were undefeated with Sidney Crosby playing wearing the maple leaf. That is so cool. Like, it is so cool what the NHL did. Like, Gary Bettman, take a bow. You finally did something right. And it's this. And we're going to have it for at least a couple of more years. I want it to expand. Why not expand it to 6 teams? Or 8? Because there are a lot of nations represented in the NHL. There's the Czech Republic, or Czechia as it's called now. There's Norway. There's Germany. Like, there's so many teams that are possibilities for them to do that will draw more eyeballs to the NHL. And I haven't had a chance to look and see what the viewership numbers of that was, but I guarantee you one thing, no matter what those numbers say, it was so much more fun to watch that than any of the slop that the NBA or the NFL or the MLS or even Major League Baseball can put together. In my opinion, though, nothing beats the home run derby. especially if stars go and do it. Nothing beats the home run derby. Growing up watching Ken Griffey Jr., Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, Mark McGwire, Jose Canseco smashing balls out of the yard, there was nothing more fun than that. So that will always hold a sweet spot in my heart. But other than that, this Four Nations face-off is worth the price of admission. It is so much fun to watch. So much fun to watch. So take a bow, Gary Bettman. Take a bow, whoever else was involved in organizing this. You did it right. And then the players, God bless them. They are going all out. And this is just a preview of what's going to happen next year at the Winter Olympics in Italy. That's going to be fun too, because it'll be the first Olympics since Vancouver where NHL players are allowed. Thank you, Gary Bettman. So yes, this was fantastic. That solved my All-Star Weekend blues, watching that game in and of itself. And that wasn't even the championship game. That was just in the round robin. USA still has to play Sweden. Canada still has to play Finland. Finland just beat Sweden in overtime. Sweden barely lost to Canada in overtime. Every game except for the USA-Finland game has been close. It's so much fun. And there's two Utah Hockey Cup players in this tournament, both for Finland, Juuso Välimäki and Olli Mata. Juuso Välimäki, I think, is dealing with an injury, and that's why he's not playing, but he is an alternate for the team, and Olli Mata is actually playing. He actually set up, with just a gorgeous saucer pass, a goal for Finland in their game against Sweden. So much fun. I'm going to get off my high horse about that now. Now, Real Salt Lake. There is no expectation for this team except for Diego Luna being a budding star. And I was very surprised that there were not more suitors to get Diego Luna off of Real Salt Lake. Now, that will change this summer as the European powers that be will come sniffing around. But at least for the first half of the season, Real Salt Lake will have Diego Luna, who put on quite a show for the U.S. men's national team. Quite a show early this year, late last year, I think is what it was. So much fun. So he is the person to watch. Another one of my favorite players is Justin Glad. I used to play center back when I played soccer, and he reminds me a lot of how I used to play. I was very brainy. He's always alert. It's very rare that a player gets behind him, and he's key in corners. So I really like watching Justin Glad, but that, again, is another because he's been the captain for the past couple of years. So who is the unknown man for you to watch out for? Well, I think it's Diogo Gonçalves, the Portuguese player that they signed halfway through the season last year. I think now that he's more accustomed to the MLS game and he knows what it's like to play in the States, I think he's going to be a very, very good attacking midfielder. And I think he's going to explode this season in a way that not a lot of people are expecting, because there is a void left by Chicho Arango being sold to San Jose. And that is... or San Diego. Excuse me. And that is a big hole to fill. No, don't get me wrong, especially during the first half of the season before the suspension and all of that stuff went down. He was in the conversation for MVP of the league. He was up there with Lionel Messi and pretty much Lionel Messi. So filling that hole is going to take a lot of guys, but I think it's going to be Diogo Gonçalves pretty fast. So, and that's another thing I want to bring up, the selling of Chicho Arango. A lot of Real Salt Lake fans are angry about it, but what did he do in the second half of the season? He didn't do anything. He scored a couple of goals, and he was a non-factor in pretty much every other game. I think it was good business for Real Salt Lake to sell him to a team that wants names, like the expansion team that just came in, San Diego. But I also want to address something else. A lot of the ownership in MLS are starting to spend more money, while Real Salt Lake is still focusing on development. And I think that is the correct way to go about it, because this market, while we are still growing here in Utah and Salt Lake City, we can't compete with New York, LA, Miami, even Chicago when they get their act together. There's just no way for this market to compete in spending. So what Real Salt Lake, their existence, if I could give a team or a club from the English Premier League that I think they could mirror, would be like a Bournemouth. Bournemouth right now in the English Premier League is in 5th, and they are battling for a prestigious spot to represent England in the UEFA Champions League. The top 4 teams go. So I think Real Salt Lake should target that sort of existence where you're going to be in the middle of the pack and then you're going to peak for a year or two, and then you're going to have to get those guys to sell them off so you could get money and then go back down to the middle of the pack and then peak every couple of years. I think that's the existence that they should target, because no matter how much money Ryan Smith wants to pump into Real Salt Lake, they're always going to be a distant third behind the Jazz and the Utah Hockey Club. So that's kind of what I think fans need to expect. Yeah, we got that title in 2008. That was amazing. That was fantastic. Kyle Beckerman, Nick Raimondo, that and Chris Olave, that entire squad was so much fun to watch. But that was an outlier. That was actually a down year for MLS. And so moving forward, I think the right expectations need to be set for this club and the fan base, because they're never going to be as active in the transfer market. I almost said portal. In the transfer market, like teams in LA, in New York, in those cities I mentioned. So that's kind of what we should expect here moving forward. The MLS is still improving as a league. Don Garber is one of the worst commissioners in sports in America. The transfer rules and how you make up a roster and how he wants to focus on homegrown talent, but he wants the league to grow internationally. Those two things are at odds with each other. They do not mesh. And so you need X amount of American-born players on your roster before you can get these international slots filled, where you only have a few of those. And then there's the whole money thing. And his deal with Apple TV has been a complete and utter flop. So he's not a very good commissioner, and he's always said he wants to compete internationally with the biggest leagues in the world. Well, the product on the pitch is really what gets the eyeballs. No matter how much marketing you do, if the product on the pitch is garbage, nobody's going to watch it. So that's kind of where we're sitting looking at the MLS, is they are a second-rate league. They are a retirement league for superstars. That's just how it is right now. But if he would loosen up this roster mess, this terrible thing he has going, then I think the MLS can start to grow, because there are owners within MLS and ownership groups within MLS that want to spend money. They just can't because of these arbitrary rules that Don Garber and the MLS offices have set in place. And then they also need to have a promotion and relegation system. They do. There is a league coming up in America called USL, the United Soccer League, where you can do this. There are clubs in the USL that are better than a third of the clubs in MLS. There are. And so promotion relegation, that increases the competitiveness of any league. Because the teams at the bottom are still going to try really hard because they don't want to get relegated. And then the teams in the middle of the pack don't want to fall into that relegation battle. So every team is going to fight. Whereas in the NFL, for example, there's 8 teams roughly that have a real shot, and then everybody else gives up midway through the season. And then you have the elite, the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Bills, the Ravens, and then you have the Cowboys, or you have the Giants and the Jets. They don't have those in the English Premier League. Although Manchester United fans could argue with me on that one at the moment. They are kind of like the Jets. But that's how I think MLS can and will improve. And I think it's something that he needs to unilaterally do with the commissioner of the USL, is create this promotion and relegation system. Because it will only improve the league. It will only improve attendance, because teams won't be giving up. There won't be tanking like there is in the NBA. So that's my fix for MLS. All right, so there is that. Really quickly, I want to touch on BYU and Utah. Utah upset Kansas at home. Gabe Madsen went nuts and scored 24 points and became the all-time three-point leader at the University of Utah. Impressive there. Utah has a very strong history of basketball. So that's awesome. I did not see that coming, especially coming on the heels of losing to Cincinnati and West Virginia, both by double digits. I did not see Utah beating Kansas, even if they were at home, which they were. So good stuff there. Utah is still in the bottom half of the Big 12 in terms of record. 14-11 overall, 6-8 in conference. They could conceivably be in the running for like an NIT bid, but they have to win out. And that's an easier prospect than it is for, say, BYU. But it's not going to be as... It's not that simple. And when your field goal percentage leader, University of Utah, is Gabe Madsen at 38.4%, oh boy. That's a tough road to hoe. And they are currently tied for 154th in the nation at 75.3 points per game. They do pass the ball really well, though. 12th in the nation with 18 assists per game. So that's really good. But they're not going to blow anybody off the court. Now, for BYU, a super impressive win at West Virginia. Nobody saw that coming. They beat West Virginia by 4. They come home and face a very good Kansas State team, or what was expected to be a very good Kansas State team. Let me change my thinking there. By 15 at home. So BYU's always been a good team at home. Always. The loss against Arizona notwithstanding, they're always a tough out at home. The rest of the way, well, let's just say it's not easy. The easiest game is Utah, but that's a rivalry game, so that's not an easy game at all. This is the murderer's row that BYU has to face the rest of the season down the home stretch. They've got Kansas at home, who are now angry, having lost to Utah. They then travel down to Arizona, who is currently tied for second in the Big 12. Then they come home to face West Virginia, who will be battling to stay on the bubble for the NCAA tournament. And then they travel to number 10 Iowa State, who is currently sitting alone in fourth. And then to wrap up the season, it's the Holy War against Utah. Yeah, it's not going to be easy for BYU at all to win out, first of all. But if they can win, I would say 4 of those games, 4 of the 6, then they're in the NCAA tournament. They're in. These would all be what they call quadrant 1 wins, where it's teams with winning records and winning records within conference play, as well as out of conference play. And the committee looks at them better than they do others. It's all overly complicated. But let's just say if BYU wins 4 of their last 6, I think they're in the tournament. I don't know what seed they'll be, probably in the double digits, but they would be in the NCAA tournament, which is kind of a great coaching job by Kevin Young, because nobody thought anything of this team coming into the season. Much like the football team, they were picked towards the bottom of the Big 12 this year, ahead of only like the newcomers and teams like Oklahoma State and UCF. Like, they were only in front of them. So overall, they win 4 of the next 6, which by no means is going to happen. I think if I were to keep my critical thinking cap on here, odds are they're only going to win 2. They'll probably win the game against Utah because it's in Provo. But these other games, it's not easy. Maybe they'll beat West Virginia as well because, again, that's in Provo. But 3 of those games are away, and 2 of those away games are against top 15 teams. I don't see BYU doing terribly well, but we'll see. They are trending in the right direction. The team is playing better. They are more seasoned now. It's a bunch of freshmen getting used to the game, getting used to the college speed as opposed to high school, or in the case of Gary Bettman, the I think it's called the Champions League in European basketball with Real Madrid. So suffice it to say, I have no idea what's going to happen with BYU down the stretch, but it's not going to be easy. That's, whoa, deep analysis there, Matt, but that's how I feel about it. All right. So that's it for the sports talk. For the last little bit here, I'm going to be talking about World of Warcraft and what I think has gone wrong for retail. So, for a little backstory here, I just finished reading Play Fair, the book about the rise and fall of Blizzard Entertainment, written by Jason Schreier. It's a very, very good book. I wish he would have been able to dive a little bit deeper on a couple of the things he wrote about. But, I mean, you have to cut something out because it would have been an 1,000-page book if he kept everything in there. So I get it. You need to make cuts where you need to make cuts, and you don't want to get too far into the weeds on anything. So that's kind of what has piqued this thought process in me, and it's also what has caused me to go back to playing World of Warcraft as much as I have been, but also because of the sheer disappointment I felt playing Civilization 7. My word, that game is garbage. So, I've been playing World of Warcraft Cataclysm Classic as opposed to retail. The first thing I want to point out is when you log into retail, no matter what level your character is in retail World of Warcraft, we're at the War Within right now, you get inundated and overwhelmed with the sheer amount of stuff that is thrown at you saying that you need to do. So, for instance, I have one level max character in retail. When I log into that character, I get overwhelmed with stuff I need to do. There's daily quests I need to do in the region. There's regional quests I need to do. I need to do my profession quests. I also need to run my dungeons. I need to do looking for raid group and get that done. I also need to continue the main storyline. Then there's these other side things that I want to do, like getting mounts from past expansions or getting different achievements that I want to get from those past expansions. And so you can tell right there, even if you don't play World of Warcraft, that's a lot to get blitzed with when I log into the game. My quest log fills up my entire screen, the right side of my screen. And I just don't even know where to start. And that's not fun. It's like going into work and you have all of this checklist of things you need to do. It's like work. And I don't want that when I play games. I don't know about you. But when I logged in to World of Warcraft Cataclysm Classic, and I started up a new character, it was fun. And it was fun because of nostalgia. Yeah, absolutely. World of Warcraft, Wrath of the Lich King, and Cataclysm, where it was the period of time where, if you go back and listen to my previous episodes, it was a very rough time for me and mentally. And this game gave me a reason to wake up, gave me a reason to get out of bed, gave me a reason to live, basically. And so, yes, it holds a very near and dear piece of my heart, but it's so simple. You log on, you get quests, you go do the quests. There's no world dailies you have to do. There's no profession dailies you have to do just to keep up. You could just go, quest, maybe run a dungeon or two, and there you go. And that simplicity is so much fun. That and your hero, your character, the person you play as, is not overpowered to the point where you are killing these mobs in 1 or 2 hits, like is the case on retail. You actually have to pay a little bit of attention here. There's more skin in the game. You can die. So that is what retail is missing. It's missing stakes. It's also missing time investment. When you hit level cap back in the day, going back to, I would say, Mists of Pandaria, and you were able to hit level cap, that in and of itself was an achievement. There were races to 85 or 80, 90, whatever the level cap was, sure. But for the majority of us, Just hitting that level cap was an achievement. It's like, yes, I did it. That was me. I put the time in and I got it done. Now, in retail, there are so many ways to hit level cap. Chief among them is just buying it with real world money. You can just buy a level boost and boom, you're at the latest expansion. You don't know how to play your class or your character, but hey, you're at the latest expansion, which does a disservice to all the other expansions before it. And there's not really any sort of investment in it anymore. And the end game, it's kind of fun in the War Within, but obviously it hasn't kept my attention because I'm playing World of Warcraft Cataclysm Classic. So that's the disconnect that's happening. You don't feel any sense of achievement when you hit level cap in retail. It's just, it unlocks this Pandora's box of so much stuff that it's like clocking into work again. And that's not why you play World of Warcraft. So that's my feelings about it. That's how I would fix it if I were the game director. I would say, all right, all of this level boosting garbage is gone. All of it. And you want to hit level cap? You're going to have to play the game. You can't just buy your way to the top. And that's what's missing. Actually learning your class, getting through difficult areas, running pseudo-difficult dungeons, having some sort of a challenge outside of a gear check is what it's called. But is your gear good enough? Yes, no. No, you lose and you wipe. Yes, you move on. That's pretty much retail right now. There's not much room for being used to the game or being, quote, good at the game. It's just your gear. And for the most part, you can buy a lot of that gear because of the WoW tokens. Using real world money to get gold in the game, you use that gold to buy the stuff, then you can use that stuff to make the gear, and so on and so forth. Whereas in the past, didn't have any of that. You had to do the content. You had to put in the time. So, overall, if you're looking to play World of Warcraft retail, still do it. It's still super fun. It's just when you get to a certain point, it's going to feel like clocking into work when you hit that login button. Whereas World of Warcraft Cataclysm Classic or even Vanilla Classic, you can kind of just have fun. There's your quests, go do them. You want to do the Dungeon Finder? Great, go do it. All right, that's the episode this week, everybody. Thank you all so much for listening. Next week, there's like 1 or 2 games for Utah Hockey Club and the Jazz. So I might have a little bit more to talk about there, but I guess I don't need stuff to talk about to fill up an episode, right? So thank you all so much for being here, and I will see you all next week when we spelunk back into the Mad Cave.